Today is lesson 8, so we're back from reading week, and we're going to go over assignment 2, assignment 2 and 3 really, but I'm going to give out assignment 2, which is small. It's going to be due next week. We are going to fix up the error that I was just too foggy to see the last time to fix up our authentication, and then we are going to look at securing resources in our Node application. So in order to perform add, edit, or delete functionality, a user will need to be logged in. We're going to want to make some changes in our navigation bar to indicate whether our user is signed in or not. And then we want to implement third-party authentication provider. So we're going to add the ability to sign into our Node job tracker with a GitHub account. So we will go through that whole process. So let's have a look first. I'm going to look at assignment. We can look at 2 and 3 because they are related. So for assignment 2, which is due next week, here's all you have to do. All you need to do is submit this Word document on Blackboard. So for assignment 3, you're going to be building an application that performs create, read, update, and delete using Node, Express, and MongoDB. So assignment 2 is simply submitting a project plan. So put your name on the document, explain what kind of application you would like to build, explain why it's useful, and you could think about kind of any extra features in addition to passport authentication and create, read, update, and delete. What else might you do? And you might want to explore some NPM packages that you might use in order to add that functionality. I also want you to explain your plan, come up with a plan with this for your CSS. Are you going to handwrite all your own CSS? Are you using a framework like Bootstrap or a template? Some combination. What is your plan? So you just need to submit this by next Thursday night. So you can build any kind of application that you want to. If you are stuck and you need some ideas, then please reach out to me, send me an email, or book an office hours appointment, and we can have a conversation, and I'll happily help you come up with a project idea. I will show you the assignment 3 document. If I'm asking you to make a plan, then I should show you the requirements as well for assignment 3, which is not due for a while. Assignment 3 is not due until the end of the month. So you have basically a week to do the plan and then 2 weeks to build the application. So we can look at assignment 3 as well. So for assignment 3, you're going to build a working application with Node, Express, and MongoDB. You can use HBS templating like we've been doing in class, and this is 20% of your grade. Okay, you'll need to submit the link. You can host it on Heroku and a link to a private GitHub repository, and it is an individual project. You can't share code or take code from the internet. However, as per usual, you're allowed to use up to 10% of code you find online. Just check with me first. Hey, Rich, I want to use this section of code in my project. Here's the site. Is this okay? So you're building a secure CRUD application. So you're going to write the code yourself. You'll create a new application. You can use the Express generator. You can choose how you're going to do your CSS. You can do your own. You can use something like Bootstrap, Foundation, Material Design, Pure CSS. But just give the site your own look and feel. And it should be different from your Node portfolio you did in assignment 1. You won't be able to create a new database. You can use your existing database that we've already got on MongoDB. And I'll actually make a few changes. You'll store this in the .env file. Use existing database. So you'll have a home page that kind of describes the application. There should be a header and footer that are shared. A public page that shows a list of data in read-only format, and then the ability to register, log in, and much like with our job tracker, those pages, the pages to do add, edit, and delete should require authentication. You will then add one additional feature on your own, and I've given you some options. You could add third-party authentication that is not local, Passport Local or GitHub. You could do something like file uploading, keyword search, or any other feature that you want. But you'll have to list this in the README file, so when I'm marking it, I know what extra feature you've implemented. So, and here is the rubric for the grading criteria. Okay, so this isn't due till the end of the month. So the idea of assignment 2 is to give you a week to think about what you want to do and do a little bit of planning. That should make the actual building of the application easier. Save and re-upload those changes. So you don't have to build anything for next week. All you need to do for next week is submit the plan of what your application is going to look like. Are there questions from anybody? Just upload the change to assignment 3. And again, if you're stuck on an idea, don't fret about it too long. Reach out to me so that we can find an idea, a project idea that you are happy with. So you'll need to submit this by next Thursday night before our next class. Next week on Friday, we're going to have a simple lab, which is where you're going to trade project plans with a partner and give each other some feedback on your plan. Basically, what do you like about your partner's project plan? Any suggestions or questions you have? And we'll call that a very simple lab, and that'll be worth a few marks for giving some feedback to one of your classmates on their plan. That'll be due next Friday night. So you don't need to worry about lab 2 for now. So everybody's good. I'm not seeing any questions about assignment 2. Seems like it's pretty clear, I'm hoping. Okay, thanks, Matt. If you do have questions after class, thanks, Chris, something comes up that you're not sure about, then of course just send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But I think the document's pretty straightforward. So this is all you need to do for next Thursday in terms of the assignment. Thanks, Ralph. Okay. So we've taken care of that. So I want to jump back into our Node project tracker. And we want to fix up the authentication problem we were having at the end of lesson 7 before reading week. Then we're going to go in and actually add authentication checks to secure our create, update, and delete routes. And then we'll implement GitHub sign in. So let's fire up our project. So I made a really, really silly mistake and tried a number of things in here we kept getting errors when I tried. This is how we left the project, and when I tried to run it, kept getting this error because I made really silly errors here on lines 51 and 52. We tried adding some other things that we don't actually need. So we're going to clean some of this code up and fix it. I'm going to show you how to fix the error that I made here. And then we can get rid of some of the code that I added in my futile attempt to debug this. Would help if I could read my own notes. The problem is here with this method. The method we need here, rather than passport.use, is passport.serializeUser and passport.deserializeUser. We call passport.use here when we're invoking the strategy. Would help if I read my own lesson notes. So changing those two use statements that I had here on lines 51 and 52, that actually fixes the error we were getting last week. So now I should be able to test my login properly. I want to first add an invalid login, and then I want to put in my valid login, and I should get different results in the browser now. So again, this first call, we're repeating the serialize user. So this is taking the user object in JSON and then storing it in a session variable, basically. And here we are reading the user data out of our session variable. So if I go to my browser, first I will put in an invalid login. So this part is working. I get a red message. And if I put in test@test.com, and I think we set the password as test1234 with a capital T. Now when I log in, okay, well, we're not quite out of the woods yet. Let's see what happened. Okay. Yeah, I need to take out now some of the code, extra code that I added when we were trying to debug this. It's crashing in here. We don't actually need this section. So I added this block of code last week, the passport.use new local strategy. We don't actually need this block. This was my attempt to debug when my issue was really down here. So this block of code here from line 39 to 48, we can remove it. It shouldn't be there. So we've got passport.use where we're creating our strategy, and then we just have our serialize and deserialize command. So we can take out that. I also no longer need here on line 23. Again, this was part of my debugging attempt. We don't need that local strategy declaration. So I'm going to go back. So my passport configuration is much smaller now. You can basically see it starts on line 20, finishes on line 41. I'm going to try it again. And if it works, we also need to deal with the secret here, which we've hard-coded into app.js, but we need to put that secret in our environment file instead. So I'm going to go try my login again now. And now once I log in, I get successfully taken to the employer's page. So this is the result we want. Okay, I'll leave the code up here for a minute. So I removed the link to the local strategy. and I removed the call to the passport local strategy down here. So now our passport configuration is right. We can log in. I'm going to want to go to the environment file next and create a secret. Just go here. Okay, so here's a link. I'm going to generate my secret randomly. I've put a link in the chat here. So maybe I want, put in like a, I don't know, maybe a 64 character hexadecimal string. So just something nice and random. I'm going to copy this value to my clipboard, and I'm going to use this as my secret. So for our session secret, I'm going to go to the environment. I'll create a variable called session secret. And I'm going to paste that random value here. I mean, you can just put in, ABC123. You don't have to put in a random string. But when we're doing some sort of secret key, it's probably a good idea. And I've called it session_secret. And then in my app.js, I can replace that hard-coded string. We can use our process.env.session secret. So that should just make this a little bit more secure. So we've removed the secret. We're not hard coding it into our app.js. It won't, the end file, it goes in the end file. It's more secure. It doesn't go in our Git repository. And instead of some kind of simple string, we've made it a more complex string. And I'll just make sure my login still works. Yeah, it still seems to work, so. So there's a couple more things we need to do around the basic authentication. Number one is we haven't actually secured any resources. Okay, so I can go to a private window where I'm not logged in, but I still have access to add, to edit, and to delete. So not only do we want to control access to these routes in the controller, but we also want to make some changes in our UI that an anonymous user shouldn't see any of the buttons or links. They should just get a read-only, a static view of this page. So we'll need to make some changes both in the employer index view as well as in the employer's controller. So pretty similar to what we would have done in ASP.NET when we were adding authentication. But it is a little more complex when we're working in the Node world. So let's first control access to these routes, to employers create, employers edit, and employers delete. So let's go to our employers controller. So under controllers, I'm going to open this up. I scroll up to the top. We're going to add an authentication section, so we are going to require passport. And then we'll make a function here called isAuthenticated. With 3 express parameters: request, response. We haven't used the next parameter before, but we're going to be using it now. So far, we've only used request and response. We've kind of ignored this next parameter. So we want to use passport to see if the user is authenticated or not. So if we can use our request object, and it has an isAuthenticated method that will return true or false. So this is built into passport. So if it's authenticated, we just say so this is where we call next. And next is a method, sorry, this should be return next. So just continue if the user is authenticated. If the user is not authenticated, so if user is anonymous, take to login. So we have this function here. This function is going to tell us whether our user is logged in, and we just want to let them continue with their request. And if they're not, we want to take them to the login page. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to call this function from all of the other functions in our controller except for the root get. So this one is public, but let's start here. I'll leave the code up for a minute. So here's what's new. So let's start with the employer get method. When someone clicks add a new employer and they want to see the blank form, we want to restrict access to say you've got to be logged in order to get here. So you should not be allowed to make a get request at employers create if you're not logged in. So what we're going to do when we have a get request at /create, we are now going to call this function. This is authenticated. We're going to call it before we evaluate the request and response callback. Oops. So we're injecting this as it's called a middleware, right? In the middle of this function, we're going to stop and say, hang on, go check is authentic if the user is authenticated first. If they are, this is where the next comes in. Next just means continue. So then keep going. Is authenticated is true, so then we evaluate this code. But we call is authenticated if our user hasn't logged in. We skip over this and we take them to login instead. And the rest of this method gets ignored. We're going to call is authenticated middleware. This is called. Okay, so before we evaluate the request and send any response, we're going to make a call out to our authentication middleware. So let's see how this works now. In this version of Firefox, I'm logged in, or I'll just make sure I log in again. And I click add a new employer, my form loads. In my private window, go back to employers, I'll click add a new employer. But because I'm not authenticated here, there's no user in the session, there's no user object, I'm now blocked from getting to that view. Right? Controlled access to the get method now. So we're going to call this same middleware for all of the other methods here. Not only for getting, when we want to post, we want to save a new employer, same thing. You've got to be authenticated. There must be a user object in the session variable. And then the same when we are deleting. Oops. So we're going to call that middleware on all of these functions as well as editing. So this is basically, I mean, in ASP.NET, this was built in, right? We could just put an authorize annotation above any method or above the whole controller, and the identity framework did all of this checking. So we're kind of in Node, we're doing this manually using Passport. So we set up our own authentication check, and then we just call it from all of these methods. So in my anonymous browser now, if I click on any employer, it tells me I need to log in. If I go to delete, still makes me log in, and the employer is still here. Okay, so this middleware allows us to run that kind of authentication check before we do all our processing inside of our method. So we've controlled access now. We've got access restrictions on all of the methods except for our root employers. But we also want to make changes in the view now. So as an anonymous user, the links should not appear for me. So how are we going to do that? Well, when we load our view, we're also going to need to pass the user object in the express request. So when our user is anonymous, then this object will be null. If somebody's logged in, then we will have their identity in the request user object. So we're going to add this parameter here when we are loading the employer's index. And now we can add some logic in this view, in views, employers, index. Close a few of these files. So now I'm going to open up that view and we can add a bit of logic here. So under employers and index, we'll start here with our add link on line 2. We're going to add a handlebars if, and we can just say if user means if this variable isn't null. And then we can end our if. So when we are logged in, this link should be displayed. When we're anonymous, it should be invisible. So I'll try it out in my two different browsers. So now notice it removed, when I restart the server, I'm logged out. So if I log in, I have an add a new employer button, but in my anonymous browser, that button is now hidden. We want to do the same thing for the delete buttons. We only want to show them when someone's logged in. And then we also want to change the titles so these are only links for authenticated users. So I'm going to wrap first my delete links in an if statement. Again, we'll say if user. So the exact same logic on our add a new employer link. The delete button is only visible to somebody who's logged in. So here I am again anonymously. Now my delete links are gone as well. I log in. Oh, okay, interesting. So here's an interesting thing. What happened? Notice my add button, I'm logged in, my add button is here, my delete buttons are gone. They shouldn't be. The reason is because we are inside of the employer's loop. So I need to, when I'm inside the loop, we need to go up one level because this user variable does not live inside, is not part of the employers. This is a top level variable that's being passed from the controller. I think with that .. slash, let's go back and try it again. Yeah. So now my delete buttons are here when I'm logged in. And when I'm anonymous, they're not. I also want to change the titles when I'm not logged in so that they don't show up as links. They're not clickable. So again, I'll add an if statement here. We'll say if user. But then we want an else. And in this case, we're just going to show so if we have a user variable, we're going to show the name as a link. Otherwise, we're just going to print the name as static text on the page, but the user can't click on it. So now an anonymous user should have add and delete links, add and delete buttons and an edit link. And anonymous users will have just a read-only page. It's just all HTML. So again, I'm logged in here. And now in a private window, I just have a read-only version of this page. And so we've controlled access. Here's the code. We've controlled access both to elements in the UI in our HBS template, and we've also controlled access through our controller methods with our isAuthenticated middleware. that we're calling for all of our private methods. By adding this, it converts a public method into a private method. So only an authenticated user can access. So we're most of the way here now with our authentication, basic authentication with Passport. Something is still missing. What's missing that we should add? This is more from a usability point of view. From a security point of view, I think we've done what we need to. That we've only given users links if they've logged in. We've controlled access to all the methods. Right, that's right. There is no way to know whether we're logged in or not. Right? They actually look the same. So, what should we do about this? What's the most common way to indicate to a user whether or not they are logged in? Yeah, I agree. So there's no point showing register and log in once somebody's already logged in. We should show the account name, and we probably also want to show log out. So someone can choose to end their session if they're done for security reasons. So we want to add a message and a logout link, and then we want to toggle them much like in our ASP.NET template. In our .NET templates, that happened automatically. When we pick the template with authentication. In Node, we're going to have to do this manually. So we're going to modify let's go to our views and our layout. So what we will do here is add, let's see, we'll say, so if we have a user, else, so I'm going to move the register and log in links inside the else. So if we have a user, if we have no user, we'll show register and log in. And in here, we'll add two other links that will show up once somebody logs in. This link doesn't have to go anywhere. It can just show our user.username. So we can print the email address in the nav bar. And we'll also have to make a logout method. Okay, so we'll have two versions. Whoops, and this, I need a number sign here. Two versions of the right side of our navigation bar. Either it will show the username and logout, or it will show register and log in. And then we'll obviously need to build a quick logout method. That's pretty simple, only going to be a couple lines of code. So here's our nav bar now. Inside of this second unordered list with MS Auto that write justified. So let's have a look at this. Whoops. Almost right. So I'm logged in here, but it says user.username. Forgot this is server-side code. So it needs to be like this. Needs those handlebar tags around it because it's a server-side variable. Okay, so now on my employers, notice it says it's got my email address and I've got logout. Over here in my other browser where I'm anonymous, you can see in my private browser, now my nav bar says register and log in. So that's cool, that's good. Now, on my employers page, you'll notice something else. It seems to be working, right? We can see my email address here and log out. Yet as soon as I go to the About page, notice it shows me register and log in, or when I go to the home page, it also shows register and log in. Every time I go back to the employers page, it's right. How come? Why doesn't it keep my username and log out? Why are these disappearing when I go to the other pages? Or even when I go to add a new employer or edit. Right now, this is the only page that's showing my username and log out. Any ideas? The code in our nav bar is actually correct. So the problem actually is not here. If we take a look in our employers controller, you'll see a clue. So in the employers, when we call this method, our nav bar is right. But when we call this method, for example, I log in and I click add a new employer. Notice my nav bar is wrong. Thank you, Colton, right? In our root file of employers, remember we added this code, we're passing the user to the view. And we did that so that we could show or hide the different links. But now we're also checking for this user variable in our navigation bar. And our nav bar says, is there a user variable on this page? If there is, then show the username and log out. Otherwise, show register and log in. So this means we want to pass this user in all of our res.render statements. Not only here, so I'm going to pass it in, put it into all the methods, but we don't need it for post or delete, but we need it for our get methods. So that's get edit and get create, because those are physical pages that load in the browser. Our nav bar is going to show up, so we want to pass the user object to each of those. So we've got this here in all of our res.render statements. Whenever we're loading a view, so we're loading index, here we're rendering the create view. So our nav bar, we want to show the user in the nav bar. And then in our get for edit, that's our other res.render. So now in all of these, our nav bar should be correct. Let's go try it out. So now when I add a new employer, I don't think I see it. Oh, I'm logged out. So now when I add an employer, my nav bar is correct. Or if I edit an employer, it's correct. So almost done. But if I go to About or the home page, notice our nav bar is wrong again. So we need to pass the user object to these two methods in our index controller as well. So we haven't worked in this file for a long time, but I'm going to go to controllers and index. And in here, we're also going to pass, along with the title, we're going to pass user as request.user. And same here. Our user is request.user. So now no matter which of the pages we go to, actually we'll want to do this on register and login as well. So on our home page and on our about page, so now I can go to about or the home page. And then lastly, we need to just build this simple logout method. Actually, I made one error in that link. In my layout, the logout method should be in our auth controller. So I forgot to add that path. We're almost due for a break, but we'll just finish this. So here I've highlighted on line 42, just like register and login, these are handled by our auth controller. Our logout is also handled by our auth controller. So we'll just need a simple logout method here in the auth controller. Get auth logout. So in this case, we have our usual request response callback. And we just call request.logout. And then we will redirect to auth login. So this will remove that request.logout. It'll remove that user object from the session. So the user will no longer show as authenticated. So we can give this a try. So I'm logged in here, shows my email address. I log out. I think I didn't save my change to my layout file because my link should go to auth logout. I'm logged in. Click logout. That's interesting. Didn't expect that. Maybe save my change again. Looks right. Let's see what's going on. Okay, it did log me out. Just try one more time. If I log in, browse around. Okay. I think I maybe just hadn't saved my change. So now I'm logged out. And when I go back to employers, I've got a read only. And my nav bar once again says register and log in. When I log in, now my nav bar is correct. I can navigate all around. I've got access to add or edit until I log out. Now I'm going to push this up to GitHub. We also, the one other thing I should do is add my session secret to the Heroku portal. Because if I push to GitHub and try to run this right now, I'm not going to be able to log in because our session secret, it lives in our environment file, but Heroku has no knowledge of this secret. So I'm just going to push this up to Git and you'll see this. We'll take a break in a moment. So I will just go here and upload my files. I'll add and commit. Lesson 8.1, local auth. So I'll push my files. But when I go to Heroku, our login isn't going to work, right? Already it doesn't work because our app is looking for this session secret. It works locally, but we need to also create this session secret in our Heroku panel. So I'm going to log in, use my authenticator. So before my app will load, I'm going to go to my job tracker. I'll go over to the settings. And I want to go back to the config vars section where we added our database, and I'm going to add a new key called session secret. Now you can either use the same secret or I can just generate a new one. My live secret doesn't have to be the same as my development one. So I'll just paste that in. And now that I have a secret, hopefully this should work again. Yep, so as soon as I put in my secret, so I can browse it anonymously. And now that I can log in, now I'm logged in successfully, and I can add, edit, and delete. Okay, so you'll need to add a session secret into your Heroku configuration. And again, it can be a different value from the one you have in your development environment. They don't have to be the same. They can be, they don't have to be. Okay, it is 9:57. So all the code we've done to complete our local authentication, it is in my Git repository for you now, if you need. Link, I will throw it in the chat. Let's take a break here. I'm gonna go and brew myself a coffee. We'll come back in 10 minutes. And then we also wanna add the ability to log in with a GitHub account. So we'll add this link and we'll install an NPM package, and then we will configure that package so that users could also register and sign in with a GitHub if they want. Okay, we will do that coming back in 10 minutes.